now that there are nieces and nephews in the picture for me, my source of entertainment is going to be, preschool shows.
Yeah, I hope you're a big fan of what's even still on.
I know that the new popular show, it's through Disney. It's some Australian show called Bluey. Apparently, it's very popular even with the adults.
I always reference SpongeBob with a lot of the stuff that we do on here, but these shows are really well written sometimes, and it's amazing because they know the parents or uncles are going to have to watch along with the kids, so they might as well fit some stuff in there that they can get something out of it too.
I think that's always great is when you have some kind of creative outlet that's saying, okay, we're our priority is the kids, but we're also going to consider the adult that's in the room with the kids. Unfortunately, there are some programs where like it's all about the kids. Like Barney, I loved Barney as a child, but when you discover YouTube when you're an adult and you go back and rewatch some of those videos, you're like, wow. Some of it did age well, like Sesame Street.
Sesame Street's another one of those ones that's really well written, and they actually cover some important social things too. It's not just, let's learn our colors. It's like, hey,
And the
somebody's feeling really down today. How do we help them? How do we be a good friend?
Well, ultimately, they're run by the Jim Henson and the Muppet people, so that's why.
Yeah.
My cousins their kids are like 5, 7 in that range, and they're being introduced to Star Wars right now, and suddenly my mom's going like, "Oh, that's a little young," or something. I was like, "You showed me Star Wars when I was 5. That was like one of the greatest things you ever did for me."
The first PG-13 movie I ever saw was Episode 3, and I remember my parents having a discussion with like other kids' parents, and they had screened it and stuff, and then they're like, okay, there's just that one scene where all the kids get killed, and maybe
I mean, then you also have Anakin Skywalker getting burned alive, and
but it's hard to say.
Well, I mean, we talked about how one of the Indiana Jones movies is the reason why there's a PG-13 movie, like the Temple of Doom. You're seeing this human sacrifice, and then you're also seeing like, we're eating monkey brains for dessert. So
that's almost like the stuff you'd expect. I wonder if like some of the stuff you watch it again and you're like, I don't remember any of this being controversial at the time or disturbing.
It's this retcon side sort of understanding that some of us have embraced, because it's one thing to go back and realize, oh, was this appropriate? Because you're looking at some stuff like, oh, this was a little offensive, and then there are some moments like, oh, really? We were watching this when we were toddlers?
Yeah, it's that revision to go back and watch some of the stuff. You're like, I did not realize that was why that was considered funny. That ooh.
Well, unfortunately, you got to learn the hard way. Sometimes it just takes a lot of time.
Yeah, and it's good that if you're taking that into consideration and learning, that's improving people as a species, I think. But you can't pretend it didn't happen. But, looking back, you're like, all right, well, we're past that now.
Yeah. So Coda, I see you have your crystal ball over there. Anything interesting popping up?
Let's see. Right, there's a sled engulfed in flames. Something about money not bringing true happiness.
That's Rosebud. That's Rosebud. Citizen Kane, man.
Oh, how could I forget? Well, there's this shadow that's in the way here.
There's a shadow in the way.
Rodent-shaped shadow. I don't know.
Rodent-shaped shadow.
Yeah, what could that mean?
I think I know. It's a groundhog. That's what it is.
Oh, of course, because today we're covering the hit Groundhog Day.
Yes, it's quite appropriate because today is the day where we have the scientific accuracy accuracy to determine how much longer winter is going to last.
I swear, it's like if that is your basis of weather reporting, I'm a little concerned about what you're doing the rest of the year.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's better than, beheading a chicken and trying to figure out where it falls to read the signs and the omens.
Yeah, a little less violent. I don't know. It still involves an animal, but it just has to determine if it sees shadow or not.
Well, if it worked for our ancestors, then why can't it work for us today?
Can't see mainstream science disagreeing with that at all whatsoever, but...
And I think this is appropriate because today we are discussing the hit 1993 movie Groundhog Day.
Yeah, we are. And this was my first time watching it. Tell me about your first time seeing it.
Yes, so this was my pick. So my first time watching it, I had just been accepted to Xavier High School, where I would eventually go, and I shadowed for a day. I followed another freshman around and, got a sense of how life was like on campus, and we went into the religion class, and they were showing Groundhog Day.
Interesting. I mean, you wouldn't normally think like a religion class watching this, but I think we'll get into it a little later, talking about how it actually makes perfect sense that they would be showing this.
Well, I mean, I had a very privileged experience at that school. I mean, I've heard some other cringeworthy experiences that other people have talked about when they talk about going to a religious school. But in these religion classes, we wouldn't even talk about the Matrix. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I could see that too. So, like, the first time you actually watched it, though.
So we watched it in that class, and I was so curious about it afterwards that, I went on Netflix afterwards and I ordered the DVDs. So that's a dated reference. How many kids today know that Netflix did not start off as a streaming service, but you would order DVDs through the mail?
Yeah, I still think that's so funny that you say, oh, I went on Netflix. You're like, oh, and then you just hit a button and played it. Like, no. I went on Prime to watch it. I streamed it. It seems like that would make sense. No, Netflix used to actually ship you a physical disc, and you'd have to then return it.
But you could hold on to it as long as you could. So that was the appeal of it. There were no late fees. Like when we would go to Blockbuster, if you had it for a few extra days, you'd be like, okay, we're going to charge you $10 extra or whatever.
Yeah, they had a list. If you were late, you're not getting another movie till you pay those fees.
It was like debt collectors and the mafia.
Yeah. Last episode, we introduced this along with the crystal ball. We have one of these.
It's a tarot card, am I correct?
You are. And we're using them to represent themes, not so much using them to divinate or figure things out, but I picked the card for the theme that I think is appropriate. In this case, I picked death.
I mean, that's very interesting for you to pick death. I know that in this movie, Bill Murray's character dies several times, though, but why do you think this is important for this episode?
Yeah, so in tarot cards, the meaning is not necessarily what people would think of immediately when the word comes. So it's a representation of multiple things. Death is a representation of the cycle of life. So it's the idea of the ending of one part of a life and then going full into another part. So that is the idea of death. You're not even to be reborn, but just a total shift for the character, something major, and then totally changing their trajectory.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. So why don't we just get into the simple plot recap? So the story goes that the narcissistic weatherman Phil Connors, played by Bill Murray, is sent on assignment to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania to cover Groundhog Day, only to discover that he is reliving the same day over and over and over again. Every time he wakes up after a night's sleep, it's February 2nd again. The same routine, the same encounters, the same people, everything.
And it's every time that clock flips, he's waking up and the day has just started like it has. How many times do we even...
Well, here's the interesting thing. So The internet has given a platform to so many people, sometimes the wrong people. We
No.
know that all too well. But it has given a platform to people who are able to share some insights that normally, you know, wouldn't have reached everybody. But a lot of commentators have estimated that Phil might have spent as much as 40 years in a repeat cycle.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
and he's not aging because the day starts again. Anything that happened previously is done, but he has the memory of it. He's waking up and reliving that at the same time. But imagine 40 years of that.
Well, the way they estimated it was, all right, it takes about 10 years to perfect a skill. And there are a lot of skills that he's perfected in this movie, such as ice sculpting, playing a musical instrument. And in fact, he's trying to pick up several women throughout it, and he's figured out exactly how he can get into their pants every time. One of my favorite sequences in the movie is when he's trying to get in, like Andy McDowell, win her over, and he's doing the same day over and over again, and he's figuring out, oh, don't do this tomorrow, and it's like scene after scene after scene progressing through.
Yeah, really just like learning one fact and then the rest of the day didn't matter. And then going back the next day and anticipating that fact and trying to impress her. That he did that a lot. So, yeah, I guess 40 years
Yeah,
possible.
I mean, and you also have to throw in there like all the moments where he's like had to crash and burn and like wasted plenty of other time as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And even like when he indulges, like how he figures out how to perfectly time casually walking up to the armored car, reaching in, taking a bag full of cash, and just walking away.
Yeah, and he's counting it down. Car passes now. They drop the quarters, and he just walks up, takes it, and walks away. He knows everything, like a dance, a choreographed dance.
And it's also interesting. He knows everybody's life story in Punxsutawney. Like the scene where he's demonstrating to Rita, like, this is so and so. She was born in Ireland. This is so and so. They're getting married, but they're having second thoughts. And it's just everybody. He knows everything. And he also knows exactly when someone's going to be choking, when someone's going to fall out of a tree. And
Yeah. And what's interesting, at the end of this movie, I got through it. He obviously gets out of the loop. And,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. But I was thinking, what broke him out of the loop? What was the actual motivation? And then I thought, why was he in the loop in the first place?
Yeah, there never was an origin for it. Like he doesn't meet like some sage or some magical figure who tells him, you've been screwing up, so you're going to have to keep reliving this day over and over again. It's unexplained. And I think that's what makes it better. There is no frame of reference. He's just trying to figure it out like he's like he's a scientist. He doesn't have some divine figure coming down saying do this, and do that.
One thing I really liked is the one scene where he's like, I think it's the same day over and over. Let me just start seeing what the rules of this are. He snaps the pencil and puts it on the nightstand. And then the next day he wakes up, pencil's not snapped. He's gained information.
I think it was also very interesting because we found out that the studio wanted an explanation for why he's going through the loop. And they were like, well, we don't really want that. But they figured out a way to sneak around that. They told the studio, we're scheduling shooting the scenes for the explanation near the end of the shoot. And then they could just say, oh, we just didn't have time to film that scene.
The old switcheroo. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Lying to executives.
The flies are the language.
So why don't we go over the basic details? So its release date was February 4th, 1993. That was just one day before my second birthday.
Oh, wow.
Not quite a special theatrical release date, but you know what? You can't have every special release date.
Special to you.
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there for it. I didn't experience it.
That's true. 2-year-old you going in watching the movie. I don't think so. No.
I mean, my parents did show me Animal House when I was 12, but they didn't. I don't think I had the intellectual capacity to watch a relatively tamer movie by that age.
You had 10 years more life experience at that point.
Yeah. So Groundhog Day was directed by comedy legend Harold Ramis. Some of his credits also include Ghostbusters, Caddyshack, National Lampoon's Vacation. He co-wrote Animal House, a
Oh
previous movie
yeah.
that we covered. And one of my other favorite little bits of trivia for those of us Office fans, he directed the episode Safety Training.
Oh, the one where there's the fire and then they have to get out and the CPR and all that one.
No, 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 no. That's Stress Relief. That's another one of my
Okay.
favorite episodes where Dwight's fire drill causes Stanley to have a heart attack. This is the one where the office workers go down to the warehouse and they get their safety training, and Michael is incredibly disrespectful, and Daryl tells him, Michael, you don't have anything to worry about. And then Michael discovers, oh, one of the risks of working in an office is seasonal affective disorder, depression. Depression has killed more people than Baylor's, so I'm going to pretend that I'm about to jump off the roof to make the warehouse people feel guilty about how they treated me.
Yeah, and he keeps rehearsing it with Dwight. Yeah, that is another very good episode.
It is. The story of this movie, it was conceived by Danny Rubin, and he wrote the first several drafts. And the screenplay was ultimately written with several rewrites by Harold Ramis. It's starring Bill Murray as Phil Connors, the legendary Bill Murray, winner of the 2016 Mark Twain Prize. Andy McDowell as Rita Hansen, the producer, and I love that Andy McDowell recently says that she feels like a reverse nepo baby because she's having a career renaissance because her daughter Margot Qualley is having her moment in the spotlight.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're her mom. Let's give you the attention.
She doesn't mind. She likes having work again.
Yeah.
And then we also have Chris Elliott from Saturday Night Live and a bunch of other countless movies, How I Met Your Mother and Schitt's Creek, where he was the mayor. What's his name on Schitt's Creek?
I don't.
Roland?
I'm
It
not
starts
sure.
with an R.
But you said you have a connection.
Yeah,
Kind of.
apparently Elliot had a house in my hometown, Old Lyme, Connecticut. I'm not sure if he still lives there, but I remember for a while, like, oh yeah, apparently he's a local resident.
Look at that.
Yeah, and then we also have a character actor that plenty of people would recognize. You wouldn't recognize his name, but you would recognize his face when you saw it. Stephen Tobolowsky as Ned Ryerson.
Phil.
Phil?
Oh.
He's Phil's old classmate who's an insurance salesman who's just like, a little too eccentric.
Yeah, he's a lot.
Yeah. And then we also have Brian Doyle Murray as Buster, the head of the Groundhog Day Society in Punxsutawney, or whatever the heck you're going to call it. But he's in charge over there. He's a townie, and he's also Bill Murray's older brother.
Wow, another family connection.
And here's my other favorite connection right here. Actor Michael Shannon and voice actress Hynden Walsh from Teen Titans and Adventure Time, they play newlyweds Fred and Debbie in this movie. And there's a famous story that goes around of Michael Shannon interacting with Bill Murray. And
Yeah, so basically, he is really excited because Bill Murray likes to play some music on his radio or something on set, and then he hears some Talking Heads music. He's like, "Oh, I love the Talking Heads. Let me start talking to Bill Murray."
yeah, and he leads up saying, "Do you like the Talking Heads?" And Murray's like, "Well, yeah, I'm listening to them," and just walks away like, "Oh, geez, I just embarrassed myself." And eventually, Harold Ramis sees him and is like, "Hey, Michael, what's wrong?" He's like, "I don't think Bill Murray likes me." And eventually, like later, they're filming another scene, and Ramis says, "Hey, Bill, come on over here. Something you want to say to Michael?" And he's like, puts his hand on his shoulder. He's like, "I don't hate you."
He get the director getting the lead actor to help somebody. I like that.
It's consoling.
Yeah.
But we do that when we're near celebrities that we're fans of. So when I was working at the Elliott Hotel, one of the first celebrities that I encountered that I was a huge fan of was John Lithgow. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I grew up on Shrek, where he played Lord Farquaad, and
Hmm.
I discovered Third Rock from the Sun when I was in college. So he's in town for like 2 months making a movie, and I'm trying so hard to impress him. And there's just like all these cringeworthy, awkward experiences, and all I can say is, God bless that man. He has the patience of a saint.
Yeah, being an actor is like 2% acting and then like 50% just trying to get through the day when people are coming up to you trying to talk to you.
Yeah, and you just putting your foot in your mouth. You sound like a dumbass, and they're talking to you like you're a 5-year-old child and everything.
Oh,
It's
that's great. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and then afterwards you're like, what did I just say? So
Oh.
when this movie was released, the budget range was between 14 million to 30 million based on what I could see. And overall it made about $105 million at the box office, and it had pretty positive reviews. Critics were comparing it to it like it was a hybrid of It's a Wonderful Life, which we have just
Yeah.
released as well. So everybody, feel free to check out that episode if you haven't. So combination of It's a Wonderful Life and The Twilight Zone, and I think that hits the nail on the head.
No, really, it does because that it's imagine if you were on the Twilight Zone and it was them telling this It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah, I can
Telling
see
the
that.
story about like reforming your life and making these life lessons.
Yeah. Again, back to the theme of death, that kind of reformatting of the brain, a total shift. Yeah.
And what was so neat about this movie was that people realized, oh, well, fantasy is kind of compatible with comedy movies that we would release in the mainstream. It's not like some art
Yeah.
house movie that everyone has to seek out, or this independently funded movie. Like you have Liar Liar, The Truman Show, and Click with Adam Sandler.
Yeah, I think a lot of the nice thing with comedy is people can get something out of the movie even if they aren't necessarily following the story or something. Just it gives the audience a lot more. You appeal to a much wider audience.
Well, think about it on the other end of the spectrum, where it would be like, oh, this is emotionally draining, or
Yeah.
maybe if it's a horror movie, it's terrifying. So not everybody wants to be on edge or emotionally drained. They want to have a good laugh while they learn a life lesson.
Yeah, and I like that. They combine some of the fantasy elements with comedy.
The movie's origin started with the writer Danny Rubens. So it started with him sitting in a movie theater waiting for a movie to start, and he had a copy of one of Anne Rice's vampire books, The Vampire Lestat, and he started thinking at that moment about immortality, and how he really started fleshing it out in his head, like, oh well, there are no rules or moral boundaries. And then he started thinking about, well, what starts to happen as time passes?
Yeah.
And then he also had another story where he was like, oh, a guy reliving the same day over and over again. I don't know if it was supernatural or anything, but he decided to combine that concept together because he figured, well, if the guy is in a supernatural way reliving the same day over and over again, that dramatically cuts the budget, because then you're not covering like all this vast time change with eras and set design and costumes and everything like that.
Now, they definitely did have their high budget moments in this movie, the train scene, the quarry and stuff. But yeah, you're not, you save the budget for that kind of stuff and then don't have to do 20 different eras and hire costume designers that specialize in one thing. That makes
Yeah.
sense. That's a good business sense.
And Ruben ultimately picked Groundhog Day as the day for repetition because he knew, based on a previous job that he had, that in Punxsutawney on Groundhog Day every year, it's a whole celebration, all these festivities and just excitement over
I
there.
imagine it's like Salem during Halloween.
Pretty much, yeah. And he opted to make the protagonist a weatherman visiting, because he had to have a reason for, your average Joe coming to visit you, even if he is a smug douche like Phil Connors. You had to have a character that you could recognize and relate to going to visit Punxsutawney. Because I don't know about you, but have you ever felt the need to go to Punxsutawney to see the Groundhog Shadow?
I have not. I see the headline and I say, great. I don't know why we're still using this as a metric for how much winter is left, but that's about where my interest in the matter ends.
Well, it's also a dry county too, so for
Jeez.
several people, they're going to be like, no way.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's interesting to hear that aspect of kind of, as the filmmaker, wait, why would this person be going there? What situation would make sense? Because the audience isn't necessarily thinking, oh, well, they had to come up with this and he had to be a weatherman. That would be their good. It's all stuff that just gets lost. But hearing about it, I think, is very interesting. That why did they do that? Oh, because that it solved this kind of dilemma. Why would somebody go visit there?
Unless they're breaking the fourth wall, doing something incredibly meta. The script was passed on to a guy named Richard Lovett of the Creative Arts Agency, who ultimately passed it on to one of his clients, Harold Ramis. And when Ramis read the script, he didn't find it funny, like laugh out loud funny, but he was intrigued by the story. He was intrigued by the redemptive arc, and he gutted the original ending, which had the loop, Phil finishing his loop, but it would pass on to Rita, and she's stuck in her loop. Because he was like, look, we can't do this. We need a catharsis.
We talk about catharsis a lot on this show, and for good reason. It's a big storytelling element, and I think, yeah, something like this, where you haven't even set up why he's in this, and then you break it, you gotta give the audience something. They gotta be able to at least walk out of there saying, okay, well, that feels pretty good.
Yeah, well, what if you started experiencing catharsis every day? I mean, do you think you could handle that?
I mean, that's a little too meta for me, Kevin. It's like a plot of Rick and Morty or something.
They ultimately chose Bill Murray to play Phil because Murray had worked with Ramis on 5 separate movies, which had included Meatballs, Caddyshack, and Ghostbusters. And other actors that were considered for Phil were Tom Hanks.
I could see that.
He ultimately passed it over because he knew that he had been typecast as the nice guy and was pretty sure that the audiences would see his redemption coming. And then there was also Michael Keaton and Chevy Chase, and above all, Kevin Kline, who was Ruben's pick for this role because he thought, okay, that's he has more acting range than Murray, and Ramis assured him, no, Bill Murray will be able to pull it off.
It's always interesting hearing about the people that didn't get cast. And another thing you don't necessarily think about. I mean, for example, the movie There Will Be Blood?
Yeah.
You know who they initially wanted to play Plainview?
Not Daniel Day-Lewis?
It was Larry David.
I mean, that would have had the opposite effect. We would have fallen in love with that character, Daniel Plainview, just because he's a crotchety old man that we just want to. It's like I would like to just be able to be blunt and honest like him.
Folks, that was not the initial person they wanted to play it, but yeah, that would be funny. Picturing Kirby.
Like, hey, come on! I drink your milkshake.
Milkshake's pretty good. Pretty good.
So it was filmed. It was not filmed in Punxsutawney. They figured out very quickly, all right, this is, from a practicality standpoint, like we cannot film this movie over.
Well, it's a dry county.
Well, I mean, everybody's got to find a way to unwind at the end of the day, so.
Yeah, well, especially people in the industry.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't filmed in Punxsutawney, so it was filmed in 2 towns in Illinois. I believe they were Chicago suburbs, Woodstock and Cary, and other scenes were filmed in Hollywood. And here's my favorite detail. Because it was not filmed in Punxsutawney, local officials would not allow Punxsutawney Phil to be loaned to the production. So,
well, I mean, last episode we talked about they had to insure the Raven for a lot of money. I'm sure Punxsutawney Phil is insured. So what'd they do?
They got around it by just trapping a random groundhog in the woods.
Wait, so they went out, put up a trap, caught a groundhog, and then cast it in the movie?
Yeah. And the best part is that it bit Murray on 2 separate occasions.
Well, it's a wild groundhog, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I hope PETA didn't find out about this, though.
I think we're a little outside of the statute of limitations.
Murray actually wanted the movie to have a somber narrative, a somber contemplative tone, because unfortunately he was in the middle of a divorce at that time,
Mm.
which led to a little bit of erratic behavior on set. I mean, he was often late, he was grouchy, he was sparring and contradicting Ramis. And in fact, there's one story, Stephen Tobolowsky recounted that Murray once walked into a local bakery, bought a whole bunch of pastries, made him carry them, and proceeded to chuck each individual pastry at all the onlookers.
Oh my gosh. Well, it might explain also his response to Shannon earlier.
Yeah, I mean, he probably didn't have the most patience at that time.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting movie because not only is it just an overall funny movie that endures to this day, it's invoked by a lot of spiritual communities. Like I said, the first time I saw it was when I was in a religion class.
Yeah, and I think one thing that a lot of people may know but not totally realize is how a lot of good comedy goes hand in hand with these very thought provoking and philosophical issues.
And it's very interesting because this not only is it a very funny movie that still endures to this day, it's also invoked by spiritual communities as well. Because, like I said, I the first time I watched this movie was in a religion class.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point because it is supposed to be a comedy, and that's what they wanted. But a lot of times, philosophy and thought provoking issues go hand in hand with comedy.
Yeah, they were just trying to make a funny movie, but little did they know it just
Yeah, I mean, there's themes of Christianity, Judaism, getting out of religion, thinking more philosophy, Nietzsche, and Sisyphus. We talked about that with another episode.
yeah, Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah. And
And
reincarnation. I mean, thus the pick of death.
yeah, it was also very interesting because like Ramis had embraced Buddhism at that time in
Oh.
his second marriage, so he was really thinking about a lot of these themes, and he had estimated that it takes the soul maybe about 10,000 years to evolve. And very interesting when we first meet Phil in the beginning of the movie, when he's puffed up on his ego and his pride, he considers himself a god. It's like, I make the weather, I am a god. But after all these, recurring loops and, repeats, he deduces, I must be some kind of god. I'm not the god, but I am a god.
Yeah, that's interesting because he does make that distinction. Now, earlier you had an interesting observation you were sharing with me.
Yeah, and this isn't something that I found myself. So usually, like when people are dealing with death and dying, there's a whole cycle of grief and everything. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that this you do see kind of like a natural cycle of the immortality, because let's focus on like how this movie progresses. The first few days that he's repeating everything, he's confused. He's just seeing everybody like, wait, is this happening again and again and again? But
Mm-hmm.
but then when he realizes, oh, there's no tomorrow, there are no consequences, there are no rules I have to follow, he's indulging in everything. Like, first he's driving the car on the train tracks and he's
Yeah.
like mouthing off to cops and he's stealing and he's lying to get into women's pants and he's having all his time. And then he's trying to pursue eventually something a little meaningful with Rita. So he's
Yeah.
given up on pursuing these one night stands with other girls. So he keeps trying, I want Rita, but he gets rejected every time. But I think in that moment, that's pretty funny how he builds off every day and figures out what to do the next day.
Yeah.
But it ends every day with him getting rejected, and he reaches a point of despair. And
Mm.
after a while, he ultimately decides, you know what, I'm gonna change. I want to be like Rita, and he has his redemption and his break.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me because that he initially, when he's trying to get with Rita, he gets pretty far, but still she ends up rejecting him because that he hasn't actually changed. He's just kind of learned the things to say, and then he actually develops and grows as a person, and then finally it
Yeah,
works.
because you notice that things start to change when he's laying in bed with her after he's like confessed everything to her, and he's like, I wish I could be more like you, or something around those lines. And that's when he starts to make the changes. He figures out, okay, I'm going to be a nicer guy. I'm going to think of other people. I'm going to go the extra mile. And it, what I love is at the ultimate day, the last time he goes through Groundhog Day, after he wins like there's the bachelor auction, and he sleeps with Rita that night, but they're not getting erotic or sexy or anything. They just lay down with each other. And Phil has ultimately broken the loop because he lets his guard down and he says, "Well, I'm just happy in this moment. I
Yeah.
don't care what happens afterwards."
And I really like how they show this because earlier in the movie, you see it would be the next day he looks over, Rita's not there. Other times he's smashing the clock in very creative ways. But there's this thing that keeps happening every day when he wakes up. The clock flips to 6, and then we have this song by Sonny and Cher, which, Kevin, you so kindly sent me before I watched this to get me prepared. So you got it stuck in my head before watching this. So thank you. Thank you for that, Kevin.
And put your little hand. Oh wait, I should stop because I think we might get sued if Cher hears this episode.
Yeah. So, yeah, you got that stuck in my head, and warning to the audience, it will get stuck in your head.
Yeah, and this is a good way to break it in the end, because in this scene, it's Rita that reaches across Phil and shuts off the alarm.
Yeah, I love that. He's just laying there like, okay, I'm content, and you see this arm reach over him and turn it off, and she's like, let's sleep in.
Perfect. So, how would you pitch this movie, Coda?
Well, it's interesting because we often talk on this show about getting back to source material. And I think the idea of Groundhog Day is something a lot of people are very familiar with. The expression coming from this movie, sure, but also it's a plot line you see as these in all different shows. Even Camilla Cabello, I believe is the pronunciation, her music video for the song Liar is this kind of day that she keeps restarting over and over and she changes things, and it's a very clearly inspired by this movie. And
you can totally tell when you see that music video. If you have seen Groundhog Day, you will understand, but it's a good introduction to everybody else who hasn't seen the movie yet.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it, you may not have necessarily made the parallels, but yeah, I'd say always getting back to that source material. It's really interesting to see how they did it the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend this movie simply because it's memorable humor. It's a great Bill Murray performance above all, but it's also a thought-provoking movie. I mean, it's like, let me tell you something. If it made its way into a religion classroom, then it's got to be worth watching. And
yeah, it has merit.
yeah, and I mean, its legacy endures to this day. Like 5 years ago, just before the pandemic and lockdowns happened, we had the Super Bowl, and one of the ads was a Jeep commercial where Bill Murray comes back and he's reliving Groundhog Day over and over again, but he sees a Jeep and he's like, "Oh, well, I'm going to take this Jeep and I'm going to kidnap the groundhog, and we're just going to have the best day of our lives over and over and over again." And you have the return of Tobolowsky as Ned Ryerson and Brian Doyle Murray, and I Got You Babe is playing the whole time. It's just such a great ad.
Now, did they recast the same wild groundhog that they caught?
Apparently not the original. I mean, I'm pretty sure that by that time fame had gotten to his head.
Oh, typical celebrity burnout.
Yeah, probably in and out of rehab several times by that point.
Well, they caught a wild groundhog. What did they expect?
I mean, it's like, bringing a simple country boy to the big city where he gets corrupted.
Yeah, thrust into the spotlight.
Yeah. So we did 2 consecutive picks on my end simply because we wanted to do timing for Groundhog Day here. But we're going to do 2 consecutive picks for Coda. So, Coda, what is your pick for next week?
So next week we're going to be going, this one is an important one, Singing in the Rain.
Yes. So this was my first time watching it, and I thought it was worth the watch, and I'm looking forward to discussing it next time.
There's a lot of good stuff in that one. And until then, I guess we're doing this new thing where we leave you with some fun fact that we learned. So since this was your pick again, I get to give another fun fact. Then you get to pick 2 facts in a row. But
Perfect.
so I found out, and look, I saw it as like just some random, hey, did you know? And then I checked. AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, had a whole article on it. I actually used to be a member there back with whenever that was. But apparently, chinstrap penguins sleep thousands of times a day. They take these little mini 4-second naps.
Wait. So they can recharge after just 4 seconds of like REM sleep?
Yeah, talk about a power nap. So they basically, I guess the theory is that if you're going to be chased by a predator or something, you don't want to be asleep because then you're a sitting duck, or in this case, penguin. But if you're out of it for 4 seconds, hey, you can get right back into it. And they've just adapted this, and it's basically they just kind of go into this, and then they're back into it.
Isn't nature amazing? I mean, all the stuff that's necessary for survival. I mean, wow. I mean, all I can say is wow. I mean, I wish I could pull off a 4-second nap every moment to recharge, but until then, I guess I'm just gonna have to caffeinate myself.
Yeah. Yes. So I bet nobody thought they'd be getting facts about penguins on this show. But anyway, next week, Singing in the Rain. And till then, I'm Cody Ewell.
And I'm Kevin Gainey.
See you next time.